pass on two lessons I learned from a great negotiator. The first one he taught me is that only one place has one price, and that's the post office. And I have found that to be true. I found that to be true. I've gone in places, I'm not a great negotiator. I've been around great negotiators, and boy, they just have brass, you know what? I am just so amazed at their brassness in offering a price. I'm not that way, but I've at least learned over the years, I don't care where I am, in a department store, whatever, I'll look, before I purchase something, I'll look at the salesperson and say, will you give me a discount? And I am so amazed at how often they'll say, well, sure, we got a coupon here, it knocks off 10%. Or yeah, we'll knock off 10% or 15%. Simply because I ask. If you don't ask, you won't receive. And I found that in almost everywhere. Another thing he taught me, that it's not how good of a salesman you are, it's how good of a buyer you are. If you buy everything for your home right, you'll always, if you ever go to sell it, you'll be able to sell it right, and you'll walk away with a tremendous profit, and you'll look like a great negotiator. That being said, there's one thing I want you to do for me. When you finish this program and you actually get out there and you're going to build or remodel a home, on your first major material purchase, I want you to negotiate a good price, get everything squared away, and I want you to call the salesman you're dealing with and say, listen, I'm ready to place this order, but there's one last thing I need you to do before I can place it. And this is your first major order, a big order. And the salesman will ask you, what do I need to do? And you just tell the salesman, I need you to knock off $400. And he'll think a minute and he'll say, okay, we'll knock off $400. Do that for me and get the price of this course back, so that in essence you got the course for free, and we'll just call it even. Thank you. After you get your cost estimate completed, if you're over budget, there's a lot of places where you could cut to bring the home within budget, so you don't have to throw your drawings away and start all over, which I'd prefer you not to do that, because some of these drawings can be quite expensive. So let's just talk about some areas listed there where you could cut corners to save money. First of all, on your foundation, if you've got a full basement, you can see pictures of this at 24/7, in that if you've got a daylight basement or a terrace level, if you notice, as you go down the side of a hill, instead of pouring concrete, you could step the concrete foundation in steps, and everything that is above ground, you frame it out of wood. By framing that area above ground out of wood instead of pouring concrete, that is significantly cheaper, and you will save a significant amount of money. If you have access to precast concrete walls in your area, that is much cheaper also, where they will actually form the concrete walls, and they'll deliver them out to a truck on a big flatbed, and they'll take a crane and they will set these precast concrete walls in place. Not only is this extremely quick, which will save you time, which will save you money, but it's normally a cheaper route to go if you have this available in your area, precast concrete walls. If your lot is conducive to have a concrete floor instead of a wooden floor, we call it a home on a slab. Building on a concrete slab is significantly cheaper than building on a crawl space or a basement, if your lot is conducive for a slab. If you go with a slab, I do recommend you have a good designer to work with because, some homes that are on a concrete floor, to me, they look terrible. They look like they're squatting on the ground. If you go to cities like Dallas, Texas, and stuff like this, where the bulk of their homes are on concrete slabs, they do it in a way where the home has a nice elevation, nice profile, and architecturally looks very aesthetically pleasing. A prefab concrete slab is much cheaper. Is significantly cheaper than an all masonry fireplace. Now, if you lived up north where you used a fireplace 9 months out of the year, I would like an all masonry fireplace. But unless that's the case, there's not that many days you're going to have a good rip-roaring fire. But I tell you, the prefab fireplaces they have now, they're so well built. They have extended warranties on them. And you cannot imagine the money you would save by dealing with the prefab. That's why in most homes now, like in the South, even in your luxury homes, most of the fireplaces are prefab. But even if you go the masonry route, look into the prefab masonry fireplace, which is cheaper than the all brick fireplace. And to me, it's far superior. Vinyl windows. Now, as you get into the luxury home, I don't know if I would go with the vinyl windows. Some of your consumers in the luxury market would probably poo-poo on the idea of vinyl windows. But vinyl windows are significantly cheaper than wooden windows. And so you may want to look into that. On your windows, like on a traditional home, we call them what they're called divided light, where it looks like little panes of glass, which is how they were built years ago. And that's a very nice look. So if you're going with a real traditional look, the divided light look is very nice. And what they'll normally do with the windows being insulated and required insulated in most areas now, what they do is they apply, in most cases, they will apply those divided light grids on top of the glass. They will, for lack of a better word, glue it to the glass to give it that divided look. As you go up in the price of the window, that divided look looks a little more authentic, and you can even get insulated glass where it is a true divided light. That is very expensive. But I want to tell you, if you leave those divided grids off, that window is significantly cheaper. So what we'll do on a traditional home is on the front of the home, we'll put the divided light grid to get that look. But on the side, and especially the rear, we'll leave that divided grid off and save a significant amount of money. I personally like it. I like, seeing that big piece of glass I can look out. And if you put shutters up, that a lot of people do now, the shutters gives it almost a divided light look from the exterior. So you kind of get that same look if that's what you're going for. But we'll put divided grid on the front, we'll leave it off the side and rear, and that's a significant savings. Of course, on the windows, you're going to see prices go from A to Z if you go from a builder grade of window to something like Andersen or Pella, which are the more expensive windows. And unless you're one of these that's going to be opening and closing windows a lot, and you just want a quality first-class window like Pella, I personally would go with the builder grade to save thousands and thousands of dollars. Instead of going with brick that gives you just that super great quality of brick, the longevity of brick, the ease of maintaining brick, the next best thing is, to me, is your fiber cement siding, the most well-known being Hardie board. This cement siding carries quite an extensive guarantee. Now, you still have to paint it, but the paint maintains itself on your fiber cement siding better than it does your normal wood siding. But it gives you that masonry quality without the expense of brick. And if you can go brick, there's no doubt that's the best way to go. Years ago on the stone, when they first started making man-made stone, it looked good, but it didn't win any prizes. If you got up to it close, you could tell it was man-made, and I just didn't like that. But I tell you what, they've gotten so good with man-made stone that in some ways the man-made stone to me looks better than the real stuff. And even your better quality man-made stone, it is much cheaper than real stone. And one of the primary reasons it's cheaper is because you don't have the waste you do with real stone. Real stone, they have to do a lot of cutting and chipping, and they waste a lot of stone to get the pieces to fit just right. Where you're man-made, it comes already in a consistent pattern, and you don't have nearly the waste you do with real stone. Therefore, you have a significant savings. On your chimneys, instead of putting real stone or bricking a chimney where you would need to have additional support, maybe steel support to support the brick, you would never put brick up on a chimney unless it was well supported. You would never put real stone up on a chimney unless it were well supported. But on that chimney, you could stucco that chimney, and that stucco would be significantly cheaper than brick or real stone. Or you could go with the man-made stone, which another good part about the man-made is a lot of your man-made, they have man-made that's pretty heavy, that gives it the feel of real stone, but they also make man-made stone which is very, very light. It enables you to put it up in places up on the roof or on a chimney where you would normally need additional support for brick or real stone. You would not need additional support for this lighter. For your sewer and drain lines, years ago, we used to use cast iron. Cast iron is great, but it's very, very, very expensive. Most builders, even in the luxury market, will no longer use cast iron. We use PVC for the plumbing pipes, and I consider the PVC even far superior than the cast iron because it will not tend to clog up like the cast iron will over time. It's lighter, easier to work with. And so we use the PVC because it's much, much cheaper than cast iron. Now, there are areas where the PVC can have a problem. And what I'm going to do is just wait until you go through the construction part, and I'm going to talk about some things you can do with the PVC to eliminate the problems, mainly noise problems I'm talking about. On your water lines, instead of using copper, you could go with water lines we call CPVC, and or you could use a product we call PEX. That's PEX. You'll be able to see information at 24/7 on PEX. Now your PVC, your CPVC, your PEX, in most cases is far cheaper than copper, and it's a lot easier to work with. If you ever needed to do anything with it in the future, this is something you could do yourself without hiring a professional plumber. But I will say your consumer in building, especially luxury homes for sale, even though I consider the CPVC, the PEX, in some ways superior and better than copper, your consumer still prefers the good old copper water lines. So you got to make that decision. On your secondary tubs especially, you could go with your one-piece fiberglass or acrylic tubs for secondary bathrooms. These are much cheaper than building a tub with a ceramic tile surround. So you need to make that decision. Again, in your luxury market, some of those customers may frown on a one-piece fiberglass or acrylic tub, but they may or may not. But again, a significant savings. There's a lot of items that you could rough in now and do the expensive part later. For example, you can put in all the piping for a central vacuum system. You can put in all the wiring for an alarm system, an intercom system. And what you can do, and that's not going to cost you very much. It's the main control units that are going to cost you the bulk of the money, and you can add those later when you have more money to operate with. You can plan on minimizing the landscaping. Now, I will say if you're building a home to sell, never, never, never minimize on the landscaping. That is the first impression item anybody sees on the home. I would cut things out of the home before I would cut the landscaping. But if you're building your own home, this is something that you could do over time. You could put minimum landscaping in now, and as time goes on, add more and more to the plan according to your budget. If you need any retaining walls, instead of using a poured solid concrete retaining wall, which is very, very expensive, I want you to look into the modular block retaining walls. You see this in commercial work all the time. I love the modular blocks because the block already has a finished look to it. I don't have to cover it with brick or stone or stucco like you do many times with a poured solid concrete wall. And it is thousands of dollars cheaper than a poured solid concrete wall. You'll see samples of this at 24/7. You could initially leave off your garage doors and openers and add them later when you have more money to operate with. If you're building a home to sell, you would need to add the doors and openers. Building your own home, this is something you could leave off and add later. You could omit the garage. If it's a detached garage, I know the first home that I built, I left off the garage with the intent of building the garage later. And this is something you could do. You could leave off the garage, just pour the pad where the garage is going to be, where you park your vehicles, and you can add the garage later. Building on a concrete slab or a crawl space, you could omit the gutters. Now, if you're building on a full basement, I highly stress that you have gutters on your home to get the water away from the foundation. But on a crawl space, on a concrete slab, I see no problem leaving the gutters off, especially if you're in areas where the ground is very sandy. It absorbs the water very easily. Just make sure the water runs away from your home. Now, if you leave the gutters off, I recommend you have at least a 24-inch overhang so water is not dribbling down the side of your home. And over your entrance ways where your doors are and stuff like this, they'll install deflectors up on the roof when they roof the home to deflect that water away from that entranceway so it doesn't rain on your head as you go in and out of an exterior door. On your interior doors, instead of having solid wood doors, you could go with solid hardboard doors, which, as far as I'm concerned, in many ways look better than solid wooden doors because they're darn near perfect. Now, if you're going to stain a door, I tell you what, unless you go with a faux staining, you cannot beat a solid wooden door if you're going to stain it. But if you're going to prime and paint that door, a solid hardboard door is the way to go. Now, if you're still trying to save more money, and that solid hardboard door is much cheaper than a solid wooden door. If you're still trying to save money, you can go with a hollow hardcore door. A hollow hardboard door. And if you're really trying to save a lot of money, you could go with a hollow core door. I've been into some very expensive homes where they installed hollow core flush doors, and you can see what I mean by this at 24/7. And you know, a builder, an interior designer would pick up on the fact that it's a hollow core flush door, very cheap, but the average public walking in never notice it, and it looks great. Quite a bit of savings there. On all your interior trim, if you're going to stain it, then you would need to go with stain grade material, which is very, very expensive. As I'll point out, you may, if you want the stain look, go with a faux painting, which makes it look like stain. But if you're going to prime and paint the trim, you could use, or I recommend you use, what we call a paint grade trim or finger joint. And in finger joint, it looks like they took little pieces of wood, they finger jointed the ends and glued them together. They can sell you that finger joint trim a lot cheaper than they can that one long continuous piece of wood. And then to save even more money, you could use a product we call MDF board, which stands for medium density fiber board. Now, I will mention in the course, and I'll mention it here and I'll say it again, in areas where you do mopping, I would not use MDF board for like base molding, because I feel like if you get dampness on that board over a period of time, it's going to create a problem. But everywhere else we'll use MDF board, and I tell you what, it is even cheaper than finger joint, a tremendous savings. And up in high areas where you can't ever touch it and feel it, you can go with like medallions for a light, or even crown molding or something. You can go with products that are made of styrofoam. Now, styrofoam is a brand name. And if Owens Corning didn't make it, they don't want you to say styrofoam. It's extruded polystyrene. At 24/7, we're going to give you the name of a major supply house that a lot of subs will buy this trim material that's made out of styrofoam or plastic. And if it's where someone can't touch it or feel it and tell that it's styrofoam or plastic, let me tell you, you can believe how cheap it is, and you can get away with it. And I've seen this in multi-million-dollar homes. You could omit the trim by leaving off the crown molding and chair rail and stuff like this. You could add it later, and you're only going to be penalized what inflation will do to you. But this trim work in a traditional home is not only is it very expensive, but the labor is very expensive, and this is something that you could add later. Now, if you really want that stained look, instead of going with stained grade material, you could get with a professional faux painter. And I tell you what, it is absolutely amazing how they can paint MDF board or finger joint or drywall and make it look like stained wood, such as stained mahogany. I mean, you'll see the grain, you'll see everything, and most people walking in cannot tell that it's not real wood. And even though this is not cheap, this professional faux painting, it is far cheaper than stained grade material. On your interior cabinets, you could build the kitchen cabinets, you could build the vanities, you could build all the bookcases out of MDF board. And it is significantly cheaper than wood. Now, I will admit, I don't know how well MDF would hold up over the years in a kitchen. I have built kitchens using MDF. I've used faux painters to paint it, and it looks gorgeous. Far cheaper than wood or stained wood. But what I will do, even if I'm a little concerned, we may use wood in the kitchen, but for bathroom vanities, especially secondary vanities, for bookcases and all these areas, we'll use the MDF and save a significant amount of money. Another area where you can save money is on ceramic tile. In a bathroom, for example, you can put carpet or vinyl, or in other areas where you think you may want to do tile, you can put carpet or vinyl, and you could add the ceramic tile later, and you would save a significant amount of money, and you will only be penalized by what inflation is going to do to you. But you see, on carpet, you could get a tremendous grade of carpet for like $20 a square yard. I mean, really nice stuff, $20 a square yard, material and labor install. Hardwood flooring is, you can get real hardwood floor, sand and finished, I know like in our area, for $5 a square foot. Material and labor install. Well, that calculates out to about $45 a square yard. Your basic ceramic tile, material and labor, like in our area, is at least $8 a square foot. That calculates out to $72 a square yard. So you can put down carpet or vinyl flooring now and then add the ceramic tile later when you have more money to operate with. This next item, I would encourage you to be a little careful on doing this, in that if you don't do it correctly, it's kind of tacky looking to me. And that is, you'll see the builder go in and they will brick the front of the home. And if you saw a picture in the real estate book, it looks like a brick home, but the sides and the rear are siding. It just has a brick front on it. And to me, that is kind of tacky looking if it's not done correctly. This is where a good architect giving some feedback, or even a design person, can tell you how to make the transition from brick to siding so aesthetically it's very pleasing. For example, on homes we've done, we'd have brick on the front, and then on the side, it'd be half brick and half siding. Then on the rear, it'd be all siding, just to make that transition so aesthetically it looked very nice. But the siding would be significantly cheaper than the brick. On your lighting, I've seen some young couples, especially on their first home, they'll have a dining room and not even have dining room furniture, and they'll pick some little cheap tacky fixture to put in the dining room. If you don't know what you want, or you don't have the money to buy what you want, where you have that light, just put a blank cover plate up there. And that blank cover plate looks a lot better than some of these light fixtures I've seen. And then when you have the money you want, or you know what you want, then you can replace that blank cover plate with the light fixture. But on your decks, instead of building your decks out of cedar or redwood or any of your no-rot material like Trex and stuff like this, which is very expensive, you can build your decks out of pressure-treated lumber and save a significant amount of money. Now, if you go the route of pressure-treated lumber, I want you to look at the book at 24/7 that we recommend on building decks, and it's going to show you all the things you really need to know about dealing with treated material. In your kitchen, for your solid surface countertops, instead of using granite, for example, solid granite, I've seen individuals go in and put granite tile on top of their kitchen counters instead of the solid granite top, which I prefer the solid granite top. But the granite tiles, the people that I've known that have done this, they love them. Significantly cheaper than solid granite tops. And last but not least, I want you to go to 24/7 and go to those websites showing stained concrete. You're beginning to see more and more builders going with stained concrete, especially down in terrace levels where they'll stain the floor. It's very, very nice looking. But I've seen people actually make tubs, make kitchen countertops out of poured concrete, and they will stain it. And it is not only very attractive looking, but significantly cheaper than granite or Corian solid surface countertops. So that may be something you want to look into. Now let's talk about the last item that's going to be part of your overall estimate that you'll see in the overhead section, but I want you to have a little better understanding of this, and that's the insurance that you're going to need when you build a home. Now, if you're remodeling, most of these areas will be covered in your homeowner's policy. If you're building new construction, this may or may not be covered under your existing homeowner's policy. I will say, if you have an existing homeowner's policy and you're going to build a new home, check with your insurance carrier to see if they will cover any of this on your new home, because they may cover this on your new home for a nominal fee. But this is the insurance I recommend you have. The first one is what we call builder's risk. If you're remodeling, this is your basic homeowner's policy. This is going to cover fire, vandalism, theft. And let me tell you something about the builder's risk policy. And some of your agents will tell you this is not true, but don't listen to them. And that is, you can get coverage for a home under construction against theft. And I went a long time before I found that out, and it made common horse sense. Who in the world would want to insure a home under construction against theft? It's a walking mark for thieves. But you can get coverage for a home under construction against theft. And what you do, you get a theft binder for your builder's risk policy. Now, this builder's risk policy, it may be $1,000 deductible, but when you get clipped by thievery, many times it's for much more than $1,000. And I tell you, it's great. I don't see how they make any money off of it. You just file a police report, turn in the invoices where you bought the stuff, and they pay right up. I mean, it is great. And there's not much you can do about theft. We try not to leave anything laying around overnight. We try not to leave anything laying around over a weekend. We notice it picks up as you get into bad economic time periods. It's, a little rougher in some sections of town. It'll pick up as you get closer to Christmas, but there's not a whole lot you can do. I know I walked on a job site one day and saw a lady trying to put a sheet of plywood in the back of her car. I walked up to her and said, asked her what she was doing. She looked at me and said, well, I'm trying to get this plywood in my car. Like, can't you help me? And I said, well, it costs a lot of money. I'd like to keep it. A lot of people see this stuff laying out on a job site. They think it's manna from heaven. Nobody really pays for it. So the best thing you can do is have the insurance. But on this theft, just to tell you a couple of stories, there's some brazen criminals out there. I know one builder that I knew, he said men were working on the job site and a panel truck drove up, or a large truck drove up, and two guys came out, and there were people working on the job site, and they went in the house and they loaded all the exterior doors and windows on this truck and drove off. And the builder came up later and walked around and asked the people on the job, where's my doors and windows? And the other sub said, well, these guys came in and, we thought they were from the supply house and loaded them on the truck and just drove off. I mean, can you imagine? And no one ever thought about stopping them. I've heard of cases where the thieves will drive up and there'll be people on the job and they'll give them some money to help them load their trucks. The people on the job thinking they're from the supply house to pick it up. But I know myself, I had a situation where I had a roller compactor that we were going to use on a job site to compact some dirt. And this is like a $15,000 piece of equipment. And when we got it on the job, I decided we didn't need it after all, and I called the rental company up, and because I was a good customer, they said they'd pick it up and wouldn't charge me since I didn't use it. Well, several days later, I came onto the job site with another subcontractor, and there was a truck there with a trailer and a couple of guys loading this compactor onto their trailer, and I just kind of waved at them, and they waved at me. And me and the sub went over to the job site, and we were talking about some work I needed. And then several days later, the rental company called me up, and they said, Tom, I'm sorry, we're going to have to charge you for using that roller compactor because you did use it. And I said, no, wait, I did not use that roller compactor. And they said, oh yeah, we're showing that you've got about 10 hours of time on the tractor. I said, no way. I said, when did y'all pick it up? And they said, well, we were busy. We couldn't pick it up till this morning. Well, I had noticed the people like 3 days prior to this, picking up the roller compactor. Can you believe they picked up the roller compactor, took it to another job site, used it for about 10 hours. Praise God, they brought it back, and before the actual rental company picked it up. But I tell you, that gives you an idea how brazen some of these people are. So also know during construction, don't assume someone picking up material is the person that needs to be picking it up. You need to do a little checking if you don't know them. But your builder's risk, one thing on the builder's risk, if you're borrowing money, the lender is going to mandate that the builder's risk policy equal the loan amount. But I want you to get it for more than the loan amount, because there is nothing worse than for you to be near the completion of that home, for example, and it burned to the ground, and you have enough money to pay off the bank, but there's no money there for your sweat equity. So I want to get it for more than the loan amount. So if anything happened to the home, I not only pay the bank off, but I pay myself for my time and effort. The next insurance you're going to need is what we call workers' comp or workers' compensation insurance. And what this is going to do is cover any of the subs on the job working and getting hurt. And I will tell you, this is a very, very dangerous industry. These people get hurt all the time. Now, you may say, well, I'm only going to hire subs that carry workers' comp. Now, if you do that, you need to do some checking, because a lot of these subs, they just can't say, yes, I carry workers' comp. They must supply you with a certificate showing that they have a current policy, and you need to take the time and call that insurance company to verify the certificate is valid, that the workers' comp is current and in place. Because subs are notorious about they'll go and get a workers' comp policy to get a certificate, and then it gets canceled for non-payment, but they go around giving this valid-looking certificate to builders, implying they have a current active policy, when in reality, they do not. And I've seen subs even forge these documents to imply they carry a valid current policy. The reason you're going to need workers' comp is so that if you have a sub that does not have workers' comp, they're going to be covered under your blanket policy. And if they are covered under your blanket policy, then you are going to deduct money from their pay to cover them under your blanket policy. Now, this is a little bit of a hassle, because what's going to happen is yearly, your insurance carrier will audit your books. And they'll go down through there and they'll see that you paid XYZ roofer. And they'll look at you and they'll say, okay, do you have a certificate for XYZ roofer? And you will hand the certificate, and they'll go to the next sub. But if you don't have that certificate, then based on what you paid that roofer, they're going to charge you a fee. And the roofer being one of the most dangerous jobs on a construction site, the fee could be almost equal to the amount you paid the sub. That's how much the workers' comp is, almost double what you paid that roofer. And that is a major upset. So what you do is, if you're dealing with a roofer and they do not carry workers' comp, you find out what from your insurance carrier, what their rate is, and you go ahead and deduct that money from the roofer's pay, and then you will apply that money to that premium you're going to owe when they audit your books. And if you don't deduct that money, you're going to have to come out of your pocket with that money, or you're going to be sued by the insurance company. And you don't want that. Now, this is a hassle. So your only other option is to only deal with subs that carry workers' comp and verify they have a valid current policy. But that can be a little troubling also. And you could still get caught in a situation where, through a technicality, they didn't have insurance. So I would encourage you to carry workers' comp. Now, I know in the state of Georgia, unless you have 3 employees or more, you don't have to carry workers' comp. Well, these people are hired by the job. They are not one of our employees. So technically, we don't have to carry workers' comp. But I will tell you, if they get hurt, their attorney is going to sue you. And yeah, you'll go to court and prove you didn't have to carry workers' comp because they weren't not one of your employees, but you will spend more in legal fees than you would have spent making sure you had workers' comp insurance. So let's pray you never have to use it, but it's like any insurance. When you need it, you're glad you got it. And you can get your insurance carrier to explain to you in your area how the workers' comp is handled. Is general liability insurance. Now, the general liability is going to cover your neighbor, his kids on your land getting hurt, the tractor operator knocking over a tree and it falling on your neighbor's property or on your neighbor's house or car. So yes, you need to carry general liability insurance. You can verify if you currently have a home and you got insurance on the home, see if your current insurance company will handle this liability on your new home. Because this general liability, the premiums have gone out of sight. And one reason they've gone out of sight is how often people abuse this policy. And I'm going to give you a little example here. I had a situation on a job site one time where we did some clearing and we had fresh dirt on the ground. And even though we had erosion control around the property, we had a major record-breaking thunderstorm, and this mud went down the hill over our erosion control, we call silt fences, into this lady's yard next door to our job site. Well, I know this is like a divorce. This is my side of the story, but I'm telling you the extent of the damage, I felt like, max $500. I mean, if we got the best of the best, maybe $1,500. This neighbor sued me for $1.5 million. Now, initially, I just laughed. I thought, this is a joke. Well, it wasn't a joke. I had to answer the lawsuit back, and I got quite an education. At first, my insurance, I turned it over to my general liability company. And the first reaction, which I found out is a normal reaction, is the general liability company denied any liability on this coverage. I said, what? You're my insurance company. But I found out this is standard procedure. So I had to hire an attorney. I spent $5,000 to take my general liability company to court for a judge to look at my general liability company and say, yes, you are liable. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, we're liable. But I spent $5,000 for a judge to tell them that. Now, to make a long story, nasty story very short, when all the dust settled, my insurance company did not want to take this homeowner to court because builders generally do not do well in court against homeowners. So my insurance company paid my attorney fees of about $25,000, paid this neighbor's attorney fees of about $35,000, and gave this neighbor $60,000 to settle out of court. I protested the whole way, but the insurance company basically said, listen, it's our nickel, and we don't care how much you protest. This is what we're doing. And now people wonder why our insurance is out of sight. But praise God, I had general liability insurance. I want you to have general liability insurance. And this is something that I really encourage you to make sure your subs carry also, especially your major subs, plumber, heating and air, electrician. I had a student friend that did a major remodeling recently in their home. They installed new hardwood flooring. They did the entire home, extensive major remodeling, installing hardwood floors and just stuff throughout. And at the very end of construction, the plumber cut the water on. The home was completely finished. They cut the water on, not aware that upstairs in a bathroom, a sink, the water had been cut on, not cut off. And I think there was something else, something had not been totally connected. And the water ran and overflowed. And the owner came into the home later. Water was dripping through the ceiling from the second floor and dripping on that hardwood flooring. It had gotten into the walls, had flooded almost the entire home. What a mess. The remodeling of that home was almost $75,000, and it was covered by the plumber's general liability policy. Had that plumber not had general liability, the owner doesn't really know if their insurance, what they would or would not have covered. So again, I prefer you deal with subs that carry general liability. Again, once you get a certificate showing they do have it, call the company, verify it's a valid current policy.